Okay, gewaltig. So we are on Daf Mem Tes Amud Aleph. We are towards the bottom, and we just brought a raya. Even Rabbi Yochanan will hold that when you make a down payment, there's a mishapara on the whole lot that the down payment was made on. But if it's just a verbal commitment, it's something that someone could be chayzer for if the person that's receiving it wasn't really Seimach Das. So the Gemara says as follows: Amar Rav Papa. No, me Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Did Rabbi Yochanan actually say that someone could back out on something if there's no semichas das and there's no problem of mechusrei amona? Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Bar Bachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, if someone makes a commitment to give somebody a matana, the person could be chayzer from giving the matana. That's not mechusrei amana. Zok Gemara, Yochel, what do you mean he can? Of course he can. He didn't make any kinyan. There's nothing that's technically sealing the nesina. So pshita. Ella, what it means is mutter lachsaba. It's a mutter lechatchila to be chayzer, and there's no problem of mechusrei amana. Amar Papa umayder Rabbi Yochanan the matana muetes the samka daitai. But if it's a matana muetes, there the person receiving it the same das that the person making the commitment to give it is going to stick to his guns because it's an easy thing to be mekayim. But if it's a big deal, then even someone promising to give a matana is not tied down to do it. So I suggest, we're getting before Pesach, and when the Enichlach are negotiating with you to give your afikoimen, if they ask for a small person, you can tell them, yeah, that commitment is a good commitment. But if they're going to ask you for a huge gift, Rabbi Yochanan said he's not even Tzemach Das. That's not even a commitment at all. Hachinami mistaber. And it's actually mistaber to make this distinction. Domer Abavo Am Rabbi Yochanan. Yisrael Shomer Leben Levi. A Yisrael told a Levi, Kur Meiser Yesh Lach B'yad. I'm planning to give you the Meiser that I have. Now that's considered a matana muetas. Why? Because even though the value of the meiser could be a lot, but the Yisrael doesn't have an ownership in that meiser. He just has a schus of toivas hana to give it to whoever he wants. That's called a matana muetas. So if someone says kurmar yesh lach biyadi, so the halach is the Levi can consider that in the bank, and therefore ben Levi rishoy la'asoy say trumas meiser al mokamach. The Levi is allowed to use this produce, even though he didn't take delivery of it yet. He can assume it's going to come to him, and therefore he's allowed to use it to be misakin other produce that he has. Frank the Gemara, if you would hold that the person giving the matana muetas cannot be chayzer, then it makes sense. But if you can say that even from a matana muetas he can be chayzer, Amai Rishoy, how could he use that for Trumas Meiser? Maybe he's not going to get it. He might be eating teva because the commitment to give it is not even the commitment. So you have a raya that from Matana Moetes, it's a good commitment. So you don't have such a raya. Maybe it's speaking in a case where the Meiser was already given and delivered and was nikna by the Levi. It is already. And then the Levi gave it back to the balabas to watch for it. Zaktamar can't be that that's the case. Because the sefer of this memory says, Nosnu leven Levi acher. What if the owner decided not to give it to the Levi who he promised it to? He decided to give it to a different Levi. Ein le'alav elatarumos. The original Levi who was promised these goods could only have tinies. But if you already gave it to him and he was kind it, it's his. He can't give it away to somebody else. Once the Levi made Mashiach, it's actually his. It must be that this member that we're talking about, he never gave it to the Levi. The Levi wasn't koine. All we have here is his commitment, and it's b'deloy notli. Shemamina, that his commitment is a binding commitment, l'gabe mechusri amana, because it's a small thing that he's giving away. Beautiful. Someone made a payment on behalf of buying sesame seeds. He went to Sesame Street and he bought seeds, but he didn't take delivery of them. The shumshumi went up. So Hadribahu, the seller, backed out of the deal. And he said, Las lon shumshumi. I don't have any sesame seeds. I sold it to somebody else. So therefore, take your money back. The purchaser did not take his money back. He left it there by the moicher, and even they got stolen. So now the question is the moicher responsible for the money of the lekach that was left by him that got stolen? Also, they brought the shiloh to Rava. Amalei Rava said, since the seller told you already to go take your money, but you didn't, he's not liable. He's for sure not considered the Shem Sacher. He has zero liability, even if he was Posheya, he's not responsible for Imam. Amalei told Rabba, how could you say that? Since this fellow paid already and he made a kinyan kesef, so then the guy's a mishapara. So either he has to give the shom shemi, or he has to accept the mishapara. That's the truth. Rabba was moida that either he has to give him the sesame seeds, or he has to accept the mishapara. Rapapi said that Ravina told me that this whole story is fake. It's fake news. It's not. It's never happened. One of the Rabbanan told me the following. Which one of the Rabbanan told this to me? Either Rav Tuvis Shemei, Rav Tuvis, or Rav Shmuel Bar Zuter Shemei. And he said, if you would have given him all the money in the world, he would never have broken the commitment based on the kinyan kasef and withhold Oshum Shemei. No matter how much money somebody else would have offered him, I would have never broken my deal with the person who made the kinyan kesef. And you know something? This whole story that you're talking about that went to Rava, I am the guy who was the owner of the sesame seeds. And the whole thing is, I never sold sesame seeds. And therefore, there's no mishapar on me. Let me tell you what really happened. One Erev Shabbos, I was sitting in my home, and a total stranger came to my house. The Bava was standing on my front gate. Amarli, and he asked me, do you happen to have sesame seeds for sale? I'm looking to buy sesame seeds. And you know what I told him? Let's turn over the Amid. Amr Leiloi, I told him I have no sesame seeds, sorry. Amr Leiloi, okay. Can I leave the money by you as a pekadon in your household? Because it's getting dark, it's getting Shabbos, and I can't carry the money. Amr Leiloi, I didn't tell him I had to watch it. I made no commitment whatsoever. All I said was, here's my house. You know what he did? He put the money in my house. I never accepted a price. I said, you can put it in my house, but I'm not accepting Shmira. They got stolen. And the Shiloh wasn't I'm mechuyev for a price on this money because it was in my house. So Osman made the Rava, and the Shiloh we asked Rava was, whenever you say a nusach like that, here's my house, but you didn't accept Shmira, you have zero liability. That was the whole question. It was never a question of a purchase, nothing. It was a question of someone placed his money in my house for safekeeping. Amr Leis said, I told him, how can it be that that's the story? Didn't the Rabbanan have ties to Rav that the Mishapara? V'Amr Li, you know what you tell me back? Loi hayu devar ma'olam. This is a complete fabricated story. There was never here a question of a kinyan kesef that was not on it. Zok to Gemara Vayter. The Mishnah brings down a shita, meaning who is able to be chayzer, dafke the moicher. But the lokech cannot be chayzer, and as we learned, we the right to can get but in order that the moicher should do whatever he could to save the chitim from burning, it's enough that he can buy back. It's enough that he can be chayzer. Tanya we learned, Amar Shimon, Amosai, when do we say that the moicher can be chayzer? Bisman shakesef v'aperes biyad a moicher, when the moicher is holding everything. Avol kesef biyad moicher, uperes biyad lekeach. But if the kesef is by the moicher and the peres is by the lekeach, eino yochel lachsa b'ayi. Why? Because the money's in his hand. Frank Gemara, biyadoi, the kesef isn't in the lekeach's hand. It's biyad moicher. It's because the lekeach is holding the product. He made a mashiach already. He's kind of. Frank Gemara pshita. What is the chiddush? If the lekech has already received the goods, he was kind of 100%. Avada no one can be chayzer. Amarav ha'chad b'mayaskin, and here's the chiddush. What happened was the moicher needed warehouse space, and the lekech happened to have extra warehouse space on the upper level of his home. You know, in nowadays people live above stores. In those days, people lived below stores, and he had a warehouse on the second floor of the lekech's house. So technically, it's in the lekech's house, but Lamaisa, the moicher is now in control of it because he is leasing that space to store the wheat. And what happened was, is now the lekech could protect it from fire. He's right there. And therefore, time in my takina rabban meshicha is because Gzeir Shema Yomer Loi Nisr Vuchitecha Ba'aliyah. But Hacha Bereshuzet lekech, here, since it's in the house of the lekech, we're not worried about that. Enough with leka ba'oinis. The lekech would make sure to save it and salvage it, and therefore there's no gzera here. Therefore, in this case, even though the lekech was not technically koina, the produce, we don't make it the koina. Someone put down money to buy wine. Then he heard that a gentleman by the name of Parzak, who was the Mishnah Lamelech, who was the Refilah, he was making a chasana, and there were those goyim were animals, and if they were making a chasana, they would go steal everybody's wine. So he didn't want to have this wine. He didn't want to buy this wine because he'll lose it because the Parzak Refilah, the bully, the thug, is going to take away his wine. So therefore, Amar le Habli Zuzi, he said, "Give me my money back. I don't want the sale." Lebi Nechamer. Also, the Kamed Reb Chisda to pass on whether or not the lekech can back out. Amar le Kederach shetikne v'shicha b'moichin kach tikne v'shicha b'lekuchais. The same way the moicher can back out, the lekech can back out as well, and this fellow has a right to get his money back and to nullify the sale, so he doesn't have to worry about it. And now we're getting into a little bit of a complex sugya. Today we're not going to hit the most complicated part, but nevertheless it requires a higher level of focus and concentration. Ha'ina. We know oina, if it's less than a shtus, we say it's machal. If it's yoysim shtus, the mekach is bottle. If it's a shtus exactly, the mechak is kayim, but you have to refund the overcharge. Now that's very, very basic. There's a lot of details, and it's not exactly the way I said it. And we're going to see how this works. Now, we're talking about a sixth. How do you measure a sixth? Do you measure a sixth based on looking at the value of the product? Or do you measure a sixth based on the purchase price? That is going to be the shayla. So let's have a look. Ha'ina arba kesef me'esrim va'arba kesef l'sela. It's 4 out of 24, which is shtus l'mekach. 1/6 of the value of the goods. So, simply stated, if you have an item that's worth 24 zuz and you sold it for 28, that's exactly a sixth extra. If you sold it for 20, it's exactly a sixth lower. Ad mosai muter lahachsir. Up until what point does the person who's ripped off, let's say in this case the likeya, until when can he claim that he wants to undo whatever happened? Ad kedei sheyir l'tager l'kroy. That's only until he has a chance to check the market and see what this item is worth. Once he does that and he doesn't complain, it's too bad for him. Reb Tarfon did something that was very beneficial to the merchants. And Reb Tarfon Balud Hayno is shmoyne kesef me'esem ve'arba kesef l'sela, which is shlish lemekach. He said it's not Hayno until you overcharge by a third. That really makes it good for the merchants. They can charge a lot more and get away with it. V'sam chutagre lut. But then he told them, Omer lehem, kol hayoy muter lachsa. I'm not just giving them a couple of hours to be chayzer. I'm letting them be chayzer the whole day, which means that it's much more likely that they'll come to the conclusion that they don't want this mecca. So now that's detrimental to the merchants. So Amrullah, they told him, Yaniach lanu Rab Tarfon b'kamenu. We don't need your help, Rab Tarfon, saying that I know it's a third, because you're messing us up much more because of the fact that you're extending the time that they have to yichayzer the mecca. They were much happier working with the divrei chacham. Itmar freitigler. Rav Omar shtus mekach shani. Rav learns, like we discussed until now, that the shtus that creates a no is based on the actual value of the goods. Shmuel Amar, it's that, plus it's also shtus mois nami shani. You also look at 1/6 of the purchase price. So let's analyze the case. Shavi shita bechamsha. If you sold something that was worth 6 for 5, so you've undercharged by 1/6 of the value of the product. Or shavi shita b'shiva, if you sold something that's worth 6 for 7, you've overcharged by 1/6 of the value of the product. There, kula amaloi pligi, the basar mekach chazin. There, everybody holds that that's considered a no. By no havir. Here, pligi, the shaila is if there's another way to also trigger a no, and that is shavi chamcha b'shis. If something was worth 5, you sold it for 6. Well, that is going to be a no of more than a shtos, because 1/5 is a lot more than 1/6. Or v'shavi shiva b'shita, or he sold something that was worth he sold something that was worth 7 for 6. That's less than a sixth of a no. It's only 1/7. L'shmuel, according to Shmuel, where you also look to see if there is a 1/6 based on the purchase price, they would both be considered Ainah. But according to Rav, Shavi Chamisha B'shita would be Bittel Mekach, because you overcharged by 1/5 of the value of the goods. And Shavi Shiva B'shita is Mechila Hava, because you've only overcharged by 1/7, which is less than 1/6. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel says, Ki Amrina Mechila Bittel Mekach, that's Hegra the Lekeshtus Mishneitztov. When you say either Mechila or Bittel Mekach, that's only if there's no angle where you can show that there was a shtus. But if you can even find one angle in which this is 1/6 of overcharge, I know how that would follow. I know, which means the Mekach is Kayim, and we return the overcharge. Tanan we learned in the Mishnah, our own Mishnah. I know Dalet Kesef me'esem v'arba Kesef l'sela shtos l'mekach. My lot, let's say what the case is the Zavin Shavi Esrim, you sold something that was worth 20, the Esrim Varba for 24. That is going to be less than a shtus. Ushmamina, shtus mois namishanim. That's less than the shtus mekach, but if the Mishnah is referring to this case, it illustrates that shtus mois is also a no. So that's not the case. It's the Zavin Shavi Esrim Varba be'esrim. You sold something that was worth 24 for 20. So the Ainah is exactly a shtus, and the moicher got ripped off because he undersold. Minatam the moicher. Who is the loser here? The moicher. Frankly, that cannot be the case of the Mishnah, because clearly in our Mishnah it's the lekeach that got ripped off. How do we know this? Because Ema Seifa. Ad Mosei Muta Lachzer, until when can you be chayzer? Bichdei Sheyir Elatager Elakroiv. The amount of time it takes to lekeach to show what he bought, to determine its real value. The Omer Rab Nachman, and Rab Nachman commented, the lekeach has a limited amount of time because he has the item and he can just go find out what it's worth. Aval moicher, who no longer has the item, so he can't possibly find its value within the time frame until he finds a similar item that he would be able to share with people to compare it to. And therefore, aval moicher lo'olam chayzer, he can be chayzer forever and ever. So clearly, the case of our Mishnah must be where the lekeach overpaid. El the zaven shavi esem varba. The item was worth 24, and he paid 28 for it. That's the shtos mekach. Tonight, the Gemara now brings the same raya from the Seif of the Mishnah and slugs it up the same way. And Tosfos wonders Havamina there would be to ask the kasha from the Seifa once we already answered the kasha from the Reisha. So it's not higher up time from Balut. I know Shemoyne Kesef Me'ashem Varba Kesef L'Sela Shalish Lemeka. My love, the Zovan Shavi Shitzuri Be'esem Varba, which is more than a sixth. You see, it's also a shlish mois, not just a shlish of the mekach. So the Zovi Shavi Esem Varba B'Shitzar. If that's the case, then the moicher is losing out. I mean, it's on the moicher. So it has to be a case where the lekech was ripped off. Ella the Shavin Shavi Chabdalid B'Talis from the trade. It was worth 24. You sold it for 32. So there's exactly 1/3 of a no. Tanya Kabas Shmuel. We have a brayta that clearly states that even shtus mois is a no, because the brayta says as follows: the person who got ripped off, he's the guy who has the upper hand in deciding how to resolve the issue. Ketzad. You sold him something that was worth 5 for 6. That's a no of 1/6 of the mois, but it's 1/5 of the mekach. What does he say the halacha is? Minasana lekeach, yad lekeach alal yoina, rata omer tein lima usi, or tein lima sharnisi. So you clearly see that this is a no, even though it's more than a 1/6 of the mekach, but it's only a 1/6 of the mois. So that's our raya to Shmuel. Mochar loy going on to Nunomeral. Mochar loy. It's going to change the daf. Mochar loy shav sheish b'chamesh. That's a case of shtus mekach. Minisane mochar yad mochar al yoyno ratzo omer letein li mekchi oitein li masha nisan. Perfect. Up until now, we assume that if it's exactly a shtus, the person who was taken advantage of has a choice between nullifying the sale or just asking for his overcharge to be refunded. But if it's less than the shtus, then we assume that right away there's nothing he can do about it. The Gemara says not like that. The Gemara declares as follows: do you say there's nothing he can do about it? The moment he makes the sale, it's too bad for him. You overpaid a little bit. Tough luck. Or maybe even he has a right to demand repayment within the period of time that it takes for him to determine its real value. If you're going to tell me that even by pachas mishtos, he has time to figure out if he was taking advantage of it or not, so then what's the difference between the shtos and non-shtos? In both cases, you have the option to correct this oina, the overcharge. So the difference will be ika the ilu shtos. By a shtos, it's completely up to the lekeach if it's ratza chayzer or ratza koina machzorina. He might want to maintain the sale. He just wants his overcharge back, or he might want to nullify the whole deal. But if it was pachas mishtos, the lekeach does not have the option to nullify the sale. It's kanu machzorina. The most he can ask for is the return of the money. What is the halacha? And we'll stop here, and tomorrow we'll start with the rayas, which get to be pretty complicated. So we'll stop here, and Bez Hashem, we will be mamshech tomorrow. Everybody should have a wonderful, wonderful day.